All right, so Trump's immigration plans for 2025. It's not just like, rehashing old stuff. This is like a whole new ball game, you know what I mean? We're going deep on this YouTube video that breaks it all down. 5 major changes, they're saying.
Yeah.
And, well, some of this stuff is going to surprise you.
You know what's really interesting is it's kind of like we've seen these shifts before in U.S. history, right? Back and forth between like welcoming immigrants and shutting them out. These new plans are kind of a swing back in that direction.
So let's get into it. First up, border security. Trump's talking about way more than just keeping the wall. Like, what would these stricter measures actually look like?
Well, you're talking about like a lot more surveillance, more Border Patrol agents for sure. Basically a way tougher approach to actually enforcing things. It's not just physical barriers anymore. It's like a whole system to stop people even trying to cross.
And for asylum seekers specifically, what kind of impact could all this have?
Well, imagine you're fleeing a dangerous situation, right? Hoping to find safety in the U.S., this kind of heavy security, it could make that journey even more dangerous. And probably a lot of people just won't even try.
Okay, this next one. This is where it gets really interesting. Trump wants to end birthright citizenship. That's a pretty big move, right? Can he even do that?
Birthright citizenship, it all comes from the 14th Amendment, right? Anyone born on U.S. soil is a citizen. To change that, you'd probably need a whole constitutional amendment. That is a massive, massive thing to try and do. You're talking years of legal battles, probably.
So yeah, not a simple policy change at all. It's wild how a straightforward idea can get so complicated legally.
Absolutely, and that's why doing this deep dive is so important. We're not just skimming the surface here, we're getting into the details and what the consequences could be.
Okay, moving on. Refugees and asylum seekers now. Trump already made it harder to get in during his first term. What's he saying now?
This video says, even bigger cuts to how many people are let in, and a big focus on robust vetting. What does that even mean in practice, though? How do they decide who gets in? And how will it affect people from different places?
That brings up some serious concerns about fairness and, potential bias. Immigration policy isn't just about numbers, right? We're talking about people's lives here.
Absolutely. We got to remember the human stories behind all these policies. These are families looking for safety, people with their own unique experiences. It's a really complex web of circumstances that's hard to categorize.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Legal immigration. Trump wants a merit-based system. What does that actually mean?
Basically, it's putting skills first, ahead of family ties. The video is saying fewer green cards for families, and more focus on H-1B visas. Those are for highly skilled workers, especially in fields like tech and healthcare. The idea is to match immigration with what the economy needs.
Sounds simple enough. But are there downsides to that kind of system?
Well, yeah. Focusing on skills sounds good in theory. But if you look at countries like Canada and Australia, they have similar systems. Studies show they can cause problems. You might end up favoring certain jobs and neglecting other ones that are still important, to keep things running.
So it's kind of like you fix one problem and create a new one somewhere else.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to think beyond just the surface level. What are the knock-on effects of all these changes? Immigration policy is really delicate, like an ecosystem. You can't just change one thing without impacting everything else.
Okay, last thing on the list. Sanctuary cities. Trump really doesn't like them. What's the plan for 2025?
Looks like a crackdown, maybe cutting their funding, or making stricter rules that force them to cooperate with ICE, basically stopping them from protecting undocumented immigrants from the feds.
What are the arguments for and against these sanctuary cities? It seems like a pretty controversial topic.
People who support them say they help build trust between immigrant communities and the police, which makes cities safer overall. They also see it as like pushing back against the federal government when they think immigration policies are too harsh.
And those who oppose them.
They usually talk about the rule of law, saying cities can't just decide which federal laws to follow, and they're worried about public safety. They say sanctuary policies can protect criminals from being deported.
So it's really a battle between local control and federal power, with a lot of ethical and legal questions mixed in.
Exactly. That's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's not just black and white. There are valid points on both sides.
And that's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive, right? Exploring these complicated issues, helping you form your own informed opinions.
What I find really striking is how connected all these proposals are. They're all pointing towards a much stricter approach to immigration, both legal and illegal. It's a really significant shift, and it could completely change American society.
It's like we're seeing America redefining its relationship with the world, and immigration is at the heart of it.
And the big question is, What will all this actually mean for people's lives? These aren't just abstract policies. They'll affect real families, workers, individuals trying to build a better life.
You're right. Like, take the end of birthright citizenship. Think about the families that would be torn apart or stuck in legal limbo. That's a human cost we can't ignore.
Yeah.
And what about the economic side of things? We always hear about how much immigrants contribute to the U.S. economy. How would a merit-based system change that?
Well, it could lead to a situation where we prioritize the highly skilled workers, but then what happens to other industries, like agriculture or construction? They rely heavily on immigrant labor. It's a tricky balance. A big change like that could have unexpected consequences.
Like a ripple effect, one change to immigration policy, and it impacts all these other areas of American life.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the global context, things happening around the world, the economy, even climate change. It all affects immigration and the decisions that are made.
So it's not just one issue, it's a whole network of connected factors.
Right, and that's why we need to approach this carefully, looking at it from different angles. There are no easy answers here.
It's important to remember that all of this is still just proposals. They could face legal challenges, political opposition, even public protests.
Absolutely. Going from a proposal to actually putting it into practice, it's rarely straightforward, especially with something as controversial as immigration. We might see court cases, gridlock in Congress, even public opinion shifting. All of that could change these plans over time.
So it's not a done deal. There's still a lot of uncertainty and room for change.
Exactly, and that's why people need to stay engaged, keep up with what's happening, be part of the conversation. It's not just about what politicians decide, it's about what we as a society want and how we shape the future of our country.
And that brings us to a really crucial point. These ideas, even as proposals, they make us think about what kind of immigration system we want in America. It raises these fundamental questions about our national identity, our economic priorities, and our responsibility to those seeking refuge.
You know, what's really fascinating is how immigration policy often reflects who we are as a nation, our values, our anxieties. It all comes out. It forces us to ask ourselves, who are we? Who do we want to be? And what is our place in the world?
It's like a test, isn't it?
Right.
How we deal with immigration shows our core beliefs and how we see ourselves in relation to the rest of the world.
Exactly. And that's why it's such a powerful debate and often an emotional one. It's not just about laws and policies. It's about people, about principles, but what it truly means to be American.
So just to recap, we've gone through these 5 major changes that Trump is proposing. We've talked about their potential impact on individuals, the economy, even our national identity. We've also pointed out the legal and political challenges they might face, and the fact that things are still very much in flux.
It's like we've peeled back the layers and seen just how complex and interconnected this whole issue is. I think the key takeaway for our listeners is immigration policy isn't simple. It has so many different facets, and its consequences are far-reaching. It deserves careful thought and open discussion.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore when it comes to immigration, both in the U.S. and globally.
Absolutely, and that's what's so great about these deep dives. It's not about giving all the answers. It's about sparking curiosity and encouraging you to learn more.
So as we wrap up, what's the one question you want our listeners to walk away with? Something to keep them thinking even after the episode is over.
I think the biggest question these proposals raise is, what does America's role in the world look like in terms of immigration? How will these potential changes affect how other countries see us, our relationships with other countries, and ultimately the lives of people beyond our borders? Because immigration is a global issue. What happens in the U.S. has consequences for the whole world.
That's a really powerful thought. It reminds us that we're not just making domestic policy, we're shaping global dynamics and perceptions.
Exactly. It shows how important it is to stay informed, to have meaningful conversations, to think about the bigger picture.
Well said. We've given you a look at Trump's 2025 immigration plans. But the conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep engaging with this crucial topic. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing a whole reset, how America interacts with the world, and immigration is right at the center of it all.
Yeah, and it really makes you think, what kind of impact will these changes have on people? We're not just talking about policies on paper, we're talking about real families, workers, people who just want a better life.
Exactly, you're right. Take ending birthright citizenship, for example. Imagine those families potentially being separated or caught in this legal gray area. It's a real human cost. You can't ignore that.
And what about the economic effects? I always hear how much immigrants contribute to the U.S. economy. How would this merit-based system change things?
Well, we might end up prioritizing those highly skilled workers, but then what about other sectors like agriculture, construction? They rely so much on immigrant labor. It's a tough balance to strike. And, a big shift like that could have unintended consequences.
Like a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
One change to immigration. And it impacts all these other parts of American life.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to remember, we're not in a bubble here. What's happening globally, the economy, even climate change, it all plays a role in immigration, in the decisions that are made.
So it's this whole web of connected factors.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to look at it from different perspectives, be open to different viewpoints. There's no easy solutions here.
Right. And it's key to remember, these are still just proposals at this point. They'll probably face legal battles, political pushback, maybe even protest.
Oh yeah, for sure. Getting from a proposal to actually implementing it, it's never smooth sailing. Especially with something as controversial as immigration. We could see court cases, gridlock in Congress, even public opinion shifting. It could all change the game down the line.
So it's not set in stone. There's still a lot of uncertainty. A lot could change.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, stay engaged, follow the developments, be part of the conversation. It's not just up to politicians. It's about what we want as a society, how we shape the future of the country.
That's a really important point. Even as proposals, these ideas really force us to ask, what kind of immigration system do we want in America? It touches on these fundamental questions about who we are as a nation, what we prioritize economically, and our responsibility to people who are seeking refuge.
It's interesting. Immigration policy often acts as a mirror. In a way, it reflects our values, our fears, everything. It makes us confront those big questions. Who are we? What do we want to be? What is America's place in the world?
Yeah, it's like a litmus test, how we approach immigration. It reveals a lot about our core beliefs, how we see ourselves compared to the rest of the world.
Exactly. And that's why this debate is so powerful, so emotional. It goes beyond just laws and policies. It's about people, it's about principles, it's about the heart of what it means to be American.
So to sum things up, we've looked at these 5 major changes Trump's proposing. We've explored their potential impact on individuals, on the economy, even on our national identity. We've also talked about the legal and political challenges they might face. And the fact that everything's still up in the air, a lot can change.
It's like we've peeled back the layers, right? And seen just how complex this whole issue is, how everything's connected. The key takeaway, I think, is this. Immigration policy is not black and white. It's nuanced, it has all these different angles, and it has huge implications for everyone. It's something we need to think about carefully, discuss openly.
Yeah, it really feels like that. Like we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to this whole immigration thing in the US and, around the world, definitely. And that's what we try to do with these deep dives, right? It's not about having all the answers. It's about getting people curious, getting them to want to learn more.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up here, what's the one question you'd want our listeners to take away from this? Something to really make them think, even after the episode's over.
That's a good question. I think the biggest one these proposals bring up is, what does America's place in the world look like, when it comes to immigration? How will these changes, if they happen, how will they affect how other countries see us, our relationships with other countries, and in the end, the lives of people all over the world? Because immigration, it's not just an American issue, it's a global one. What happens here, it has ripple effects everywhere.
That's a really powerful point. It reminds us that it's not just about making policy for the US, it's about shaping how the whole world sees us, how things work globally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've given you a look at what Trump's proposing for immigration in 2025. But like we said, the conversation doesn't stop here. Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, stay engaged with this issue. It's important. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel US Immigration News. We hope you are doing great. Well, in today's video, we will be talking about 5 major immigration changes Trump wants to implement in 2025. Donald Trump's immigration agenda for 2025 focuses on reshaping US immigration policy through stringent security measures, limiting refugee and asylum admission, and emphasizing merit-based systems. One of his top priorities is strengthening border security, particularly along the US-Mexico border, where he aims to complete the border wall project initiated during his first term. This includes deploying advanced surveillance technology, increasing the number of border agents, and expanding detention facilities to discourage illegal crossings. A central element of Trump's border strategy would also involve stricter enforcement of immigration laws, ensuring rapid deportations for individuals entering the US unlawfully. Trump also seeks to end Birthright citizenship, a policy that grants automatic citizenship to children born in the US. Critics of this policy, including Trump, argue that it incentivizes illegal immigration, especially among people seeking to secure US citizenship for their children. Abolishing a Birthright citizenship would likely require a constitutional amendment or executive actions, but Trump has committed to making this a key component of his immigration reforms. Reducing the number of refugees and asylum seekers admitted to the US would be another significant part of Trump's immigration policy. During his first term, Trump imposed historically low refugee caps, and his 2025 plan could likely lower these numbers even further. The emphasis would be on a more rigorous vetting process for asylum seekers, particularly from countries deemed to pose a national security threat. As a result, many asylum seekers could be denied entry at the border, while refugees would face stricter admission criteria, potentially reshaping the US approach to humanitarian immigration. Trump's immigration reform plan also calls for a shift towards a merit-based system with a greater focus on admitting highly skilled workers who can contribute to the US economy. This would involve expanding the numbers of H-1B visas for workers in sectors like technology and healthcare while limiting family-based immigration. The goal is to prioritize individuals who possess the skills and qualification needed to fill job shortages, aligning the immigration system with the US economic needs. Another key aspect of Trump's 2025 immigration plan is a cracking down on a sanctuary cities localities that limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities. Trump has long been an opponent of these cities, arguing that they hide the immigration enforcement. His second-term administration would likely seek to penalize sanctuary cities by cutting federal funding or introducing policies to compel local governments to cooperate with the federal agencies like ICE. The aim would be to ensure that immigration laws are enforced nationwide regardless of local stances. Trump's proposed changes represent a sharp shift toward restricting immigration with policies designated to prioritize national security and economic considerations, while limiting the entry of individuals based on a family ties or humanitarian reasons. If enacted, these policies would have a profound implication for both US immigration law and the future of global migration to the country.